continue to read the story On a Stone Pillow by Murakami. This is the second part. A week later, her poetry collection arrived in the mail. Honestly, I really didn't expect her to follow up and send it. I figured she had totally forgotten about me by the time she got back to her place in Kogani. Oh, perhaps she had tried to forget me as soon as she could. And I never imagined that she would go to all the trouble to put a copy of the book in an envelope, write my name and address, stick on a stamp, and toss it in a mailbox, maybe even going all the way to the post office, for all I knew. So one morning, when I spied that package in my mail slot in the apartment, it took me by surprise. The title of the poetry collection was On a Stone Pillow. The author was listed as Chiho. It wasn't clear if this was her real name or a pen name. At the restaurant, I must have heard her name many times, but I couldn't recall it. No one called her Chico. Though that much I knew, the collection was in a plain brown business envelope with no name or return address, and no card or letter included. Just one copy of a thin poetry collection, bound together with a white string, silently resting inside. It wasn't some cheap mimeograph, but nicely printed on thick, high-quality paper. I'm guessing the author arranged the pages in order, attached the cardboard cover, and carefully hand-bound each copy using a needle and a string to save on book bending costs. I tried imagining her doing that sort of work, but couldn't picture it. The number 28 was stamped on the first page. Must have been the 28th in a limited edition. How many were there altogether? There was no price indicated anywhere. Maybe there never was a price. I didn't open the poetry collection right away. I left it on top of my desk, casting the occasional glance at the cover. It wasn't that I wasn't interested. It's just that I felt that reading a poetry collection someone put together, especially a person who a week before has been naked in my arms, required a bit of a mental preparation. A sort of a respect toward it, I suppose. Finally, that weekend, in the evening, I opened the book. I leaned back against the wall next to the window and read it in a winter twilight. There were 42 poems contained in the collection, one tanka per page, not a particularly large number. There was no forward, no afterword, not even a date of a publication, just printed tanka in straightforward black type on white pages with generous margins. I certainly wasn't expecting some monumental literary work or anything. Like I said, I was simply curious. What kind of poems would come from a woman who yelled some guy's name in my ear as she bet on a towel? What I found as I read through the collection was that several of the poems really got to me. Tanka were basically a mystery to me, and still are, even now. So I'm certainly not able to venture an objective opinion about which tanka are considered great, and which ones not so much. But apart from any judgments of a literary value, several of the tanka she wrote, 8 of them specifically, struck a chord deep within me. This one, for instance, the present moment, if it is the present moment, can only be taken. as the inescapable present. In the mountain wind, a head cut off without a word. June water at the roots of a hydrangea. Strangely enough, as I opened the pages of the poetry collection, following that large black printed words with my eyes and reading them aloud, the girl's body I saw that night came back to my mind, exactly as it was. Not the less than impressive figure I saw in the morning light, but the way she was as I held her body, enveloped by smooth skin, in that moonlight night. Her shapely round breasts, the small hard nipples, the sparse pubic hair, her wet vagina. As she reached orgasm, she shut her eyes, bit down hard on the towel, and called out again and again another man's name in my ear. The name of a man somewhere, a plain name I can't even recall. As I consider that, we will never meet again. I also consider how there's no reason that we cannot. Will we meet, or will it simply end like this, drawn by the light, trampled by shadows? I have no idea, of course, whether she is still writing tanka or not. As I said, I don't even know her name and hardly remember her face at all. What I do remember is the name Chiho on the cover of the collection, her defenseless, supple flesh in the pale winter moonlight shining through the window, and the mini constellation of two small moles beside her nose. Perhaps she is not even alive anymore. Sometimes I think that. I can't help but feel that maybe at some point she took her own life. I say this because most of her tanka, or at least most of the ones in that collection, depicted images of a death. And for some reason, these involved a head being severed with a blade. For her, that still might have been her own way of dying. Lost in this incessant afternoon downpour, a nameless axe decapitates the twilight. But in a corner of my heart, I'm still wishing she is alive somewhere in this world. Sometimes I will catch myself all of a sudden hoping that she has survived, that she is still composing poetry. Why? Why do I take the trouble to think about something like that? There is not one thing that connects my life and hers, even if, say, we passed each other on the street, or were seated at adjoining tables in a restaurant. I seriously doubt that we would even recognize each other. Like two straight lines overlapping, we momentarily crossed at a certain point, then went our separate ways. Many years have passed since then. Strangely enough, or perhaps not so strangely, people age in the blink of an eye, each and every moment. Our bodies are on a one-way journey to collapse and deterioration. Unable to turn back the clock, I close my eyes, I open them again, only to realize that in the interim, so many things have vanished. Buffeted by the intense midnight winds, these things, some with names, some without, disappear without a trace. All that is left is a faint memory. Even memory, though, can hardly be relied on. Can anyone say for certain what really happened to us back then? If we are blessed, though a few words might remain by our side, they climb to the top of the hill during the night, crawl into small holes dug to fit the shape of their bodies, stay quite still, and let the stormy winds of time blow past. The dawn finally breaks, the wild wind subsides, and the surviving words quietly pick up from the surface. For the most part, they have small voices. They are shy and only have ambiguous ways of expressing themselves. Even so, they are ready to serve as witnesses, as honest, fair witnesses. But in order to create those enduring, long-suffering words, or else to find them and leave them behind, you must sacrifice unconditionally your own body, your very own heart. You have to lay down your neck on a cold stone pillow illuminated by the winter moon. Aside from me, maybe there's not another soul in this world who remembers that girl's poems, let alone someone who can recite them. With the exception of number 28, that slim little self-published book, bound together with a string, is now forgotten, dispersed, stuck up somewhere into the benighted darkness between Jupiter and Saturn, vanished forever. Perhaps she herself, assuming she is still alive, cannot recall a thing about those poems she wrote back when she was young. Maybe the only person I recall some of her poetry even now is because it's linked to memories of her teeth marks on that towel. Maybe that's all it is. I don't know how much meaning or value there is in still remembering all that, in sometimes pulling off that faded copy of the poetry collection from my drawer and reading it again. To tell the truth, I really don't know. At any rate, those remained, while other words and memories turned to dust and vanished. Whether you cut it off, or someone else cuts it off, if you put your neck on the stone pillow, believe it, you will turn to dust. That's the end of this story.